Chosen one, listen to me closely for a moment, because what you are about to hear is not a coincidence. You did not stumble onto this message by accident, scrolling past 1,000 other things only to stop here, on this exact sentence, at this exact hour of your life. Something in you has been sensing a shift, a tension, a quiet discomfort coming from people who used to feel close to you, and you have not been imagining it. You have felt it in rooms that used to feel warm and now feel strangely cold. You have felt it in conversations that used to flow easily and now carry a slight hesitation, as if people are choosing their words around you more carefully than before. There are signs that only a chosen one experiences, and if you recognize even one of them right now, I want you to know that you are not broken and you are not too sensitive. You are simply awake. You have started having dreams that feel sharper than ordinary dreams. Dreams that leave you with a feeling that something was being shown to you rather than just imagined. Dreams that linger in your body for hours after you wake. You have felt a frustration that you cannot fully explain, a restlessness that has nothing to do with your circumstances and everything to do with a calling pressing against the inside of your chest, demanding to be acknowledged, even when your life has given it no obvious place to go. You have noticed that certain people have grown quieter around you, that conversations stop when you walk into a room, that there is a strange charge in the air whenever your name comes up, as though your presence alone changes the temperature of a space. You have felt eyes on you that you cannot trace, attention you never asked for, and a kind of scrutiny that exhausts you even though you have done nothing wrong, nothing that should warrant this much quiet watching. And underneath all of it, you have felt a pull towards something bigger than your current life. Even when you could not name what that something is, even when no one around you could see it yet. If any of that sounds like you, then hear me when I say this. You are not imagining the tension around you. You are an earth angel walking through a world that was not built to hold the frequency you carry. You are part of a divine plan that started before you were old enough to understand what a plan even was. A plan that has been quietly arranging people, doors, and seasons around you long before you ever felt ready. And right now, in this exact moment, heaven has paused everything around you, just to make sure this message reaches you, undistracted and unhurried. The door you have been knocking on is already open. You just have to look up. Before I take you deeper into what this season truly means, I want to pause for just a moment and share something with you. Chosen ones often carry a stronger natural gamma brainwave activity than the average person. The kind of brain activity associated with insight, breakthrough thinking, and moments of sudden clarity. But long seasons of waiting, rejection, and unspoken pressure can quiet that frequency over time, even though it never actually disappears. The way a signal grows faint under static without ever truly going silent. A researcher named Dr. James Rivers spent decades studying this exact pattern in the brain. And out of that research came something called the genius wave, a 7-minute audio experience designed to gently support the brain in returning to that natural state. I am not going to walk you through all of it right now. If something in you stirs while I describe it, the link is already waiting for you in the pinned comment below. We will come back to this in much greater detail very soon, but I did not want to take you through everything that is about to unfold without first giving you that anchor. Because what is unfolding in you right now is not random, and it is certainly not punishment. The tension you feel from people around you, the silence that falls when you enter a room, the sense that you are being measured by eyes you cannot see. All of it is evidence of something true about you that the people around you have not yet learned how to hold. You were never meant to shrink to fit the comfort of a room. You were built to carry light into rooms that were not designed to receive it. And that is precisely why some of those rooms have grown so quiet around you. This is the part most chosen ones never get told. The discomfort other people feel in your presence is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that your presence is doing something they cannot name, something they feel before they can explain it, which is exactly why it shows up as silence instead of words. You were never meant to perform smallness so that others could feel comfortable around you. You were meant to walk fully into who you are, even while the room recalibrates around you, even while old relationships strain under the weight of your growth and old friendships quietly reshape themselves into something smaller. This is the cost of carrying a calling that is bigger than the room you are currently standing in. And it is a cost that every chosen one before you has had to carry as well, long before you, and it will be carried by others long after you. You are not the first to feel watched for simply being yourself. You are not the first to feel the air shift when you walk in. And you will not be the last to discover that the very thing making others uneasy is the very thing heaven has been preparing in you all along. So before we go any further, I want to give you something simple to hold on to, something you can practice right now, in this very moment, wherever you are sitting or standing or lying down as you listen. This is called the 7-minute return, and it has 3 steps. Step 1. Bring to mind something you are grateful for that did not happen, not a blessing you received, but a disaster you were quietly spared from, a door that closed before it could hurt you, a person who left before they could do more damage, a delay that protected you from a mistake you could not yet see. Sit with that for a moment and let gratitude rise for the thing that never happened to you, the wound that was prevented rather than healed. Step 2. Speak this statement gently to yourself. Time has not forgotten me. Time has been assembling me. Let those words settle into the place in you that has been afraid you were simply being left behind while everyone else moved forward. Step 3. Now, for 7 full minutes, sit in silence. No phone, no noise, no distraction. Just you, your breath, and the quiet. This silence is not empty. It is preparation. And it is the 7 minutes that will open the door to everything I am about to give you in full in the next part of this message. Right now, something in you is stirring, and I have a feeling that somewhere out there, someone else, someone you may never meet, is in desperate need of exactly this message today. So if you feel that stirring, consider pressing like, not for me, but so this message has a better chance of finding that person. Leave a word in the comments if you want, just so another chosen one, scrolling through tonight, can see that they are not the only one sitting with this feeling. If you know someone who has been quietly struggling, someone who has gone unusually silent lately, consider sending this to them, because sometimes the simplest act of love is just placing the right words in front of the right person at the right time. Consider subscribing too, so that the next message finds you without you having to go looking for it. And if you feel moved to do so, there is a donation link gently placed in the pinned comment below, not as a transaction, but as a way of passing a little of this light forward to whoever needs it next. Whatever you choose to do, just know that none of it carries any weight of obligation. You are free either way. You have just spent 7 minutes in silence, the same 7 minutes that begin to open something in the brain that we have only briefly touched on so far. Now I want to give you the full picture of what that really means. Earlier in this message, I briefly mentioned something. Now I want to give you the full picture, because what I touched on for only a moment deserves to be understood completely. not skimmed past on the way to something else. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. Researchers call it gamma. It is one of the fastest and most distinct patterns of electrical activity the brain produces, and it has long been associated with moments of sudden insight, with the feeling of two unrelated ideas suddenly clicking into place, with the kind of mental clarity that does not arrive through effort but through alignmentists, who study people known for exceptional creativity, fast learning, and strong intuitive thinking, have repeatedly found elevated gamma activity present in their brains. It is not something those people manufactured through willpower or years of forced discipline. It is something that was simply more accessible in them, more awake, more available to be used in the ordinary moments of their lives. This is where Dr. James Rivers comes into the story. Dr. Rivers spent more than 30 years studying the brain, with research connections to institutions including MIT and affiliations tied to NASA-related research work. Over those decades, he kept circling back to a single question: why do some people seem to access clarity, creativity, and steady inner calm so naturally, while others, often equally capable, equally intelligent, equally hardworking, struggle to reach that same place no matter how hard they try? The pattern he kept finding traced back to frequency, specifically to the relationship between two particular brainwave states, theta and gamma. Theta waves, sitting in the range of roughly 4 to 8 cycles per second, are associated with deep creativity, fast learning, intuition, and the kind of quiet inner knowing that often arrives at the edges of sleep or in the stillness right after waking. In those in-between moments, the mind is usually too busy to notice. It is the frequency state children spend much of their time in naturally, which is part of why children absorb language, music, and new ideas with a speed that adults often cannot match, and why they seem to feel things before they have the words to explain them. Gamma, sitting at a much higher frequency, is associated with integration and breakthrough, the moment when scattered pieces of understanding suddenly resolve into a single clear picture. The moment a problem that felt impossible an hour ago suddenly looks simple. Together, theta and gamma describe a kind of mental state where creativity and clarity are not fighting against resistance, but flowing, where the mind is not straining to produce an answer, but simply receiving one that was already forming beneath the surface. What Dr. Rivers found in his research is that chosen ones, people whose lives have followed long patterns of unusual sensitivity, deep feeling, and seasons of being misunderstood or set apart, tend to carry strong natural access to both of these frequencies, almost as if it were built into them from the beginning, rather than developed later in life. But long seasons of hardship, waiting, and unspoken pressure do not erase that access. They bury it. The frequency becomes quieter, harder to reach, the way a radio signal grows faint under static without ever actually disappearing, still broadcasting somewhere underneath the noise, waiting for the interference to clear. This is the problem the Genius Wave was built to address. It is a 7-minute audio experience built around a principle called brainwave entrainment. Brainwave entrainment is not a new or speculative idea. It describes the brain's well-documented tendency to synchronize its own electrical activity with rhythmic sound patterns it is exposed to, much like a tuning fork in a room will begin to hum faintly when another tuning fork nearby is struck at the same pitch. The Genius Wave uses carefully structured binaural beats and isochronic tones, layered with precision, to gently guide the listener's brain toward theta and gamma activity, without requiring meditation, without requiring concentration, without requiring any particular skill or prior experience. You simply listen, and your brain does what brains have always known how to do: follow the rhythm placed in front of it. And this is why it only takes 7 minutes. 7 minutes is long enough for the brain to begin genuinely following the rhythm it is hearing, and short enough that the brain does not grow fatigued or begin resisting it the way it might during a longer, more demanding practice. You already have a sense of what that feels like, because you just spent 7 minutes in silence at the end of the last section. That silence was not filler. It was preparation. It placed you in the same posture of stillness and openness that the genius wave itself works with, which means the step from where you are right now to the full experience is not a leap. It is simply one small step forward, one you have already rehearsed without realizing it. People who have used it describe the shift in fairly ordinary human terms. Not dramatic transformation overnight, but a noticeable softening of mental fog, an easier time finishing things they had been stuck on for weeks, a sense of waking up with a clearer head instead of an immediately noisy one. Some describe finally being able to sit with a difficult decision without their mind scattering away from it within the first 30 seconds. Others describe simply sleeping a little more deeply, which on its own changes how the rest of a day feels, how patient they are, how present they are with the people around them. None of this is described as magic. It is described as a kind of return, a falling back into a state that was always available, just quieted under the weight of a hard season that lasted longer than it should have. Now, I know some of you are thinking that $39 is not nothing. And you are right, it is not nothing. I am not going to pretend that money does not matter, especially if this season has already been hard on you financially as well as emotionally. That feeling is valid, and I want to honor it rather than talk past it as though it does not exist. Here is where things stand. The Genius Wave normally sells for $49. Today, through the single link in the pinned comment below this video, it is available to you for $39. It also comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, not a 30-day guarantee, a full 90 days. That means you can sit with it, use it daily, give it real time to work with your brain, rather than judging it after one listen. And if at the end of that 90 days you do not feel that something genuine has shifted, you can request a full refund, no complicated process attached. I do want to be direct about one more thing. There are imitation versions of products like this circulating online, using similar names and similar language to attract attention away from the original. I want to protect you from that. The only source I can personally stand behind is the single link pinned in the comment below this video. That is the only link connected to the actual guarantee I just described, and the only one I would point you toward with confidence. I also want to be honest that the access to this particular price is not something that stays open indefinitely. Pricing like this tends to be tied to a limited window and a limited number of available spots at that rate. And once that window closes, it closes. I am not telling you this to rush you or to manufacture pressure where none exists. I am telling you because it is true, and because I would rather you know the real shape of the situation than make a decision without the full picture in front of you. What I can tell you is this. If something in you stirred while I described theta and gamma, while I described that quiet, buried frequency finally being given room to breathe again, that stirring is worth paying attention to. You do not have to act on it today. But in the pinned comment, waiting, in case this is the moment you decide to walk through it. And whether you do or you do not, what we are about to move into next does not depend on that decision. There is more to understand about this season you are walking through, more about why the people around you have grown quiet, and more about what that silence has actually been protecting all along. What you are about to hear may feel uncomfortably specific, as if someone has been quietly watching the inside of your days without your permission. That is not an accident. It is simply what happens when someone finally puts language to a season that has gone unspoken for too long. A season you may have started to believe only you were walking through, alone, without anyone close enough to name it for you. There is a sudden wave of sadness about the past that shows up without warning. Sometimes in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. Sometimes while doing something as small as washing a dish or driving a familiar road you have driven 100 times before. It is not always grief over something specific. Sometimes it is grief for time itself, for years that move differently than you expected, for versions of yourself you used to be and are not entirely sure where they went. You might be folding laundry or sitting at a red light or standing in a grocery store aisle, and suddenly something rises in your chest that has no clear trigger and no clear name. It can catch you off guard even on what should be a good day, arriving uninvited in the middle of laughter or rest, as if your body remembers something your mind has tried hard to move past. This sadness does not ask permission before it arrives, and it rarely explains itself when it leaves. It simply passes through, the way weather passes through a season, leaving you a little quieter than before, a little more aware of how much you have actually carried. Familiar places and people suddenly feel heavy and strange, as though the rooms you used to feel safe in have quietly shifted in temperature. A house you grew up in, a friend group you used to belong to without thinking twice, a job that once felt like home, all of it can start to feel slightly foreign, slightly tight, like clothing that no longer fits the shape you have become. You walk into spaces that used to feel effortless and find yourself counting the minutes until you can leave. You sit across from people who used to know you completely and feel a strange distance, as though you are speaking two different languages that happen to share the same words. You may even find yourself rehearsing conversations in your head, wondering how to explain a change in yourself that you cannot fully explain even to yourself. This is not you losing connection to your life. This is you outgrowing a version of your life that was built for someone. You used to be someone smaller than who you are becoming, someone who fit more easily into rooms that no longer have space for who you are now. There is a recurring dream about an unopened door, appearing again and again in different settings, sometimes locked, sometimes simply closed, sometimes standing open just a crack with light coming through that you can never quite reach before waking. Sometimes the door is in a house you do not recognize. Sometimes it is in a hallway from your childhood. The setting changes, but the door does not. The repetition is not random. Something in you keeps returning to that image because something in your waking life keeps circling the same unresolved question. The question of what is on the other side of the thing you have been waiting for, and whether you will recognize it when it finally opens, and whether you will still know how to walk through it after waiting so long. And then there is the strange experience of the same message, appearing again and again in different places, a phrase you hear in a conversation, then see written somewhere unrelated, then hear again in a song or a sermon or a stranger's offhand comment, until it stops feeling like coincidence and starts feeling like something insisting on being noticed. You begin to wonder if you are imagining the pattern, and then it appears again, just specific enough that you cannot dismiss it as chance, just constant enough that you start to pay closer attention to everything around you, as though the ordinary world has quietly become a place full of small, deliberate signals meant only for you. Underneath all four of these signs sits a quieter set of pains that often go unspoken because they are difficult to put into clean sentences. There is insomnia that has nothing to do with caffeine or screens, a mind that simply will not stop turning over the same unresolved questions in the dark, hour after hour, while the rest of the house sleeps without effort, while the clock moves forward without offering any answers. There is loneliness that persists even in a room full of people, the specific kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded without being known, of laughing at the right moments while still feeling, underneath it, completely unseen, completely unreached by everyone standing close enough to touch you. There is the ache of feeling wronged by people who never apologized and likely never will, an ache that does not fade simply because time has passed, an ache you have learned to carry quietly, so it does not become one more thing people misread about you. And there is the exhausting experience of being misunderstood by people who were supposed to be the ones who understood you best. The people whose misunderstanding hurts more precisely because they were never supposed to be strangers to you, never supposed to require this much explaining. I want to offer you a different way of holding all of this, because the word waiting has likely felt, for a long time, like a punishment, like proof that you were somehow passed over, forgotten, set aside while everyone else's life kept moving forward on schedule, hitting milestones you have not reached, building things you have not been able to build, while you stood quietly on the sidelines wondering what you had done to deserve such a long delay. I want to gently take that word out of your hands and offer you a different one in its place. Not punished. Positioned. There is a difference between being overlooked and being positioned, and the difference matters more than it might seem. To be overlooked means to be ignored, set aside, treated as though you do not matter enough to be considered, as though your name simply slipped someone's mind. But to be positioned means something else entirely. It means being placed exactly where you need to be, even when the placement does not look like progress, even when it looks, from the outside, exactly like standing still. A seed beneath soil is not being ignored by the ground around it. It is being positioned for a growth that has not yet become visible to anyone watching from above. The same is true of you. The waiting you have walked through has not been the world forgetting about you. It has been the quiet, deliberate work of positioning you somewhere you could not have stood in if you had arrived there too soon. Before you had the strength the next season would require of you, before the people meant to meet you there had even arrived themselves. This is not a small reframe. This changes the entire emotional shape of the season you have been in. You were not abandoned in the waiting room. You were protected inside it, kept somewhere safe, while something necessary finished forming in you, something that needed exactly this much time, and not one day less. What you have just recognized in yourself in these last few minutes is not only personal. Right now, in different time zones, in different languages, other chosen ones are sitting with this exact same recognition, feeling the same quiet weightlifting in the same fragile way you are feeling it right now. If something in you wants to mark that you were here, consider letting this message reach the next person who is ready to be named and seen in this same way, simply by pressing like. If you want to leave a word in the comments, let it be less for anyone watching and more for yourself, a small private record that you showed up for yourself today. And if there is someone in your life who has been quietly struggling to find stillness in a season that has felt too loud, consider passing this along to them. If you feel moved to leave something behind in the pinned comment as a way of blessing the next person who finds their way to this same recognition, that gift is yours to give freely, without any need to explain it. And if any part of this has felt like home to you, consider staying, not by clicking a button, out of habit, but by choosing to remain part of this community of chosen ones who are learning, together, how to hold their own becoming. Now, if what I have described has felt less like a video and more like someone quietly describing your own life back to you, I want to invite you to do something simple. Type the words "I see it" in the comments below. Just that, nothing more. Not for me, not for anyone watching, but as a small act of acknowledging out loud that you recognize yourself in everything that has just been said. Stay with me here, because what you just recognized in yourself does not end with a single word typed into a comment box. Recognition is only the beginning. What comes next is harder, and it deserves to be said honestly rather than rushed past, because honesty is the only thing that will actually carry you through to where this is going. There have been years that the waiting has taken from you, and I am not going to pretend otherwise, just to keep this message comfortable. I want to sit here with you for a moment in the honest weight of what this season has actually cost, before we move toward anything that resembles comfort or resolution. Too many messages like this one rush toward the silver lining before the actual loss has even been acknowledged, and I am not willing to do that to you tonight. There are relationships that could have been built in this time, friendships that might have deepened, a partnership that might have formed, connections that simply did not happen because you were somewhere else inside yourself, somewhere quieter, somewhere harder to reach. Maybe you watched people around you build those relationships with apparent ease, while you stood slightly outside the circle, present but not quite available, carrying something you could not fully explain to anyone, standing close enough to ask. Maybe there were people who reached toward you during this season, and you simply did not have the capacity to reach back. Not because you did not want to, but because everything in you was occupied with simply staying upright. That is a real loss. I am not going to call it anything other than what it is. There is a career that could have gone further by now. Opportunities you watched pass to other people, while you stayed in the same place, doing the same work, wondering if you had simply been forgotten by whatever system was supposed to notice you. Maybe you trained people who were later promoted past you. Maybe you watched someone with less experience step into a room you had been quietly preparing yourself to enter for years, a room you had earned the right to walk into long before they did. There were nights you went home, replaying conversations from work, wondering what you could have said differently, wondering if the problem was your timing or your worth, never quite settling on an answer that brought any peace. That is not a small thing to carry. It does not become smaller just because someone tells you to be grateful for what you have. There is the freedom to tell people your big dreams, a freedom that slowly eroded the longer those dreams stayed unrealized. At some point, you may have stopped telling people what you actually hoped for, not because the hope died, but because you grew tired of the look on their faces, the polite nod that did not quite believe you, the question asked once too often about how that dream was coming along, asked with the kind of gentle pity that hurt more than outright dismissal would have. So you got quieter about it. You learned to keep your biggest hopes folded small enough that no one else could see the shape of them, tucked away in a place even you stopped visiting very often. And somewhere in that folding, a part of you that used to speak freely simply went silent. And there is faith in yourself, perhaps the deepest casualty of all. Faith that you can trust your own timing, your own judgment, your own sense of what is true about you, even when no evidence has yet arrived to confirm it. Long seasons of waiting, have a way of wearing down that particular kind of faith, replacing it with a quieter, more exhausted question that sounds something like, what if I was wrong about myself the whole time? What if the thing I always sensed in me was never actually there? What if everyone else saw something true about my limits that I simply refused to see in myself? These are not small questions. They are the kind that visit you at night, uninvited, and refuse to leave until the room gets light again. I am not going to rush past any of that by telling you it was all worth it, or that you should already be grateful for the lesson, or that the breakthrough waiting on the other side makes the cost disappear. It does not work that way, and I refuse to insult what you have carried by pretending it does. The years are real. The losses are real. The quiet erosion of confidence, of relationships, of the freedom to dream out loud, all of it is real, and it deserves to be named honestly before we go looking for any meaning inside it. I want to take you to a moment in Scripture that holds this same kind of weight. A moment that does not skip ahead to resolution either. There was a man named Daniel, a man who served faithfully in a foreign kingdom, whose excellence was so consistent and so undeniable that it began to threaten the people around him. The officials and administrators who worked alongside him grew uneasy. They watched him operate with a clarity and integrity they could not find any fault in. No matter how closely they searched, no matter how carefully they combed through his work, looking for the smallest inconsistency. And because they could not find a flaw in his work, they decided to manufacture one out of his faith instead. They conspired against him, convincing the king to sign a law they knew Daniel could not obey without violating what he believed. A law crafted specifically to trap a man whose only real offense was being too consistent, too excellent, too set apart to control. When Daniel learned of the new law, he did not change his behavior to accommodate the threat around him. He continued doing exactly what he had always done, praying toward his God 3 times a day, in the open, in front of a window, in full view of the very people who were waiting to use it against him. He did not hide. He did not negotiate himself smaller to survive the room he was standing in. And they did exactly what they had planned. They reported him. The king, who respected Daniel and clearly did not want to enforce the punishment, found himself bound by his own law, unable to undo what had been set into motion by people who could not tolerate Daniel's excellence existing so plainly in front of them. Daniel was lowered into a den of lions, sealed in with a stone, left there for an entire night, with no certainty of what the morning would bring. I want you to sit with that moment specifically, not the part that comes after it, but this moment, the stone sealing him in, the darkness of that den, the silence of it with no guarantee attached to it. Daniel did not yet know how the story would end. He simply had to spend the night, in the consequence of being too consistent for people who could not stand to be near someone they could not find a flaw in. That is the part of his story I want to leave you with right now. Not the resolution, not yet. Just the night itself, the sealed stone, the unknown hours, the cost of being a person whose integrity made other people so uncomfortable that they would rather destroy him than coexist with what his excellence revealed about themselves. If you have felt that same kind of cost in your own life, the conspiring glances, the quiet exclusion, the sense that your consistency has somehow become inconvenient to people around you, I want you to know that you are not imagining the pattern, and you are not the first person it has ever happened to. There is a long history of people whose excellence cost them something before it ever proved itself to anyone watching. You are simply walking a road that has been walked before, by people whose names are still spoken centuries later, precisely because they did not shrink when shrinking would have been easier. We are not finished with this story. But for tonight, I want you to sit with the weight of it honestly. The same way I asked you to sit with the weight of everything you have lost in your own. Waiting, not skipping ahead, not rushing toward comfort, just staying here in the truth of how much this has actually cost you for one more moment before we move forward. There is an ancient way of understanding time that most people never learn. A way of seeing that does not measure your life by the clock on the wall, but by something deeper, something that has been quietly working underneath every hour you have lived through, long before you had the language to notice it. I want to introduce you to it now, because I believe it will change the way you carry everything we just sat with in the last part of this message. The first concept is called the hour of revelation. It describes a specific moment that exists inside every difficult season. A moment when the truth of why you went through what you went through finally becomes visible. Not before that moment, not during the hardest stretch of the waiting, only when the hour itself arrives. Until then, the reasons stay hidden, sealed away like a letter that has not yet been opened, and all you are left with is the experience of the difficulty itself, without the meaning attached to it yet, which is part of what makes a long season so disorienting. You are living the chapter without being able to read the title of it. Think about what we left Daniel in at the end of the last part. Sealed inside a den of lions. A stone rolled across the entrance, an entire night ahead of him with no certainty of what the morning would bring. In that moment, Daniel did not yet understand why his excellence had cost him so much. He did not yet know that the very thing making other men conspire against him was the same thing about to be proven in front of an entire kingdom as untouchable. He simply had the night, the unknown hours, the silence of a sealed stone with no information coming through it, no voice to tell him how the story would end. Nothing but the sound of his own breathing and whatever faith he had left to hold on to in the dark. And then morning came. The king, who had not slept that night either, walked to the den at first light and called out to Daniel in a voice the scripture describes as anguished, asking whether the God Daniel served so faithfully had been able to save him. There is something worth noticing in that detail. The king himself had spent the night unable to rest, troubled by what he had been forced to do to a man he respected. Even the one who signed the law against Daniel could not find peace in it. And from inside that den, in the very place his enemies had intended to be his ending, Daniel answered. He told the king that his God had sent an angel to shut the mouths of the lions because he had been found innocent before God. Not one wound was found on him. The same conspiracy designed to destroy him became the very stage on which his integrity was proven beyond question, in front of the exact people who had doubted him, and in front of the very men who had built the trap in the first place. That is the hour of revelation. The pain finally has a name, and the name is the calling itself. Daniel was never rejected for being flawed. He was conspired against because his excellence was undeniable, and undeniable excellence makes people who cannot match it deeply uncomfortable. The very thing that drew the conspiracy was the very thing the lions could not touch. The hour of revelation did not erase the night that came before it. It simply revealed what that night had actually been for all along. I want you to hear what this means for you, specifically, in your own life, right now. If people have grown strange around you, if rooms have gone quiet when you walk in, if you have felt watched, measured, quietly excluded by people who used to feel close to you, you are not imagining a flaw in yourself that deserves that treatment. You are standing inside the same pattern Daniel stood inside. The discomfort other people feel around you is not evidence against you. It is evidence of something in you they cannot explain away, something that will eventually be proven, the same way Daniel's integrity was proven, in full view of the very people who doubted it. The whispering around you right now is not the final word on who you are. It is simply the noise that tends to gather around anyone whose excellence has not yet had its hour. You have not yet reached your hour of revelation, but it is coming, the same way morning came for Daniel, the same way it always comes for anyone who refuses to shrink simply because the room around them has grown uncomfortable. This brings me to the second concept I want to give you, one that sits closely beside the first. It is called the appointed time. This concept teaches that there is a specific moment already set into motion for the thing you have been waiting for, a moment that exists independently of how things currently appear. Even when nothing visible is happening, even when the silence stretches longer than you expected, the appointed time has not been canceled. It has simply not arrived yet. And there is a profound difference between those two things. A difference that can be hard to feel from inside the waiting but becomes unmistakable once you understand it. Delay is not denial. A door that has not opened yet is not the same as a door that will never open. The appointed time operates on its own clock, one that does not consult human impatience or human doubt before it moves, one that does not speed up because you are tired and does not slow down because someone else is uncomfortable with your pace. What has been ordained for you cannot be canceled by delay, no matter how long the delay stretches, no matter how convincing the silence becomes, no matter how many people around you have quietly stopped believing it will ever come. I want you to notice something about Daniel's story that is easy to miss. He did not know. In the moment the stone was rolled across that den, that morning would bring vindication. He simply continued being exactly who he was, faithfully, consistently, without bargaining himself smaller to survive the threat around him. The appointed time was already moving on his behalf even while he sat in complete uncertainty about it. His faithfulness in the dark did not cause the appointed time to arrive. It simply positioned him to recognize it the moment it did, to be standing exactly where he needed to stand when the morning finally broke. This is the posture I want to invite you into right now. Not frantic effort to force a door open before its time. Not despair that mistakes a delay for a permanent no. Simply steady, faithful continuation of who you already are. The same way Daniel kept praying toward his window 3 times a day, even after the law was signed against him. Trusting an appointed time he could not yet see evidence of. Trusting it the way you keep walking toward a door you cannot yet see opening. I want to say something gently here, because it connects to what I briefly mentioned earlier in this message. Part of what makes seasons like this so exhausting is the mental fog that settles. Enduring long periods of uncertainty, the difficulty staying clear and steady when nothing around you is offering confirmation that you are on the right path. If you found yourself curious earlier about the genius wave, about the 7-minute practice built around theta and gamma activity, the link is still gently waiting for you in the pinned comment whenever you feel ready. There is no rush attached to that. I simply wanted to remind you it is there, in case the clarity it offers feels like something your appointed time could use while you wait for it to arrive. Something to steady your mind while your hour of revelation finishes forming. You are not behind schedule. You were never behind schedule. The hour of revelation has a fixed place on a calendar that was never given to you to control. And the appointed time is already set and set into motion long before you ever felt the weight of waiting for it. What is required of you now is not striving, it is steadiness. The same steadiness Daniel carried into a den He had no guarantee of walking out of the same steadiness that turned out to be exactly what his appointed time was waiting to meet. The same steadiness waiting to meet yours. Something inside you is shifting right now, even if you cannot yet point to exactly what it is. You can feel it the way you feel weather changing before the first drop of rain actually falls. A pressure in the air, a sense that something has already begun moving, even though nothing visible has arrived yet. Maybe you have noticed it in small, hard-to-explain ways, a restlessness that feels different from anxiety, a quiet anticipation that does not match anything currently happening around you, a feeling you have started to trust, even though you cannot fully explain it to anyone who asks. I want to name 3 specific areas where that shift is already underway, because naming them will help you recognize the movement when it finally surfaces in your own life, rather than dismissing it as coincidence the way you might have in an earlier season. The first area is your relationships. Right now, certain people are quietly beginning to distance themselves from your life, and I want you to understand that this is not loss in the way it might feel in the moment. It is clearing. Some of the people who have surrounded you during this season were never meant to walk with you into what comes next. They served a purpose during the waiting, companionship, familiarity, a sense of not being entirely alone, but they were not built for the version of you that is currently forming. They knew an earlier version of you, and that version is no longer the one walking forward. As this shift continues, you will notice conversations growing shorter, invitations becoming less frequent, a kind of natural drifting that does not require conflict or confrontation. No dramatic ending, simply a quiet fading that you may grieve even while understanding it is necessary. You may find yourself reaching out less, not out of bitterness, but because something in you already senses the season has changed, even before your mind has caught up to that fact. At the same time, new people are beginning to appear on the periphery of your life, people you have not met yet. People whose paths are being arranged to intersect with yours at precisely the right moment. Not a moment too soon, and not a moment too late. You will not force these connections. They will simply arrive, already aligned, already carrying exactly what your next season requires, as though they were sent, rather than simply encountered. And you will know it almost immediately by how easy the connection feels compared to everything that came before it. The second area is your purpose. For a long time, the question of what you should actually be doing with your life has felt enormous, vague, impossible to censor in any satisfying way. A question that has followed you into quiet moments and refused to offer anything resembling clarity, the kind of question that shows up uninvited while you are trying to fall asleep. That fog is beginning to lift. You will not receive the entire blueprint all at once, every step laid out from beginning to end the way you may have hoped for. What you will receive is one small, clear step, simple enough that you cannot mistake it for confusion, specific enough that you will know exactly what to do the moment it arrives in front of you, even if it looks far smaller than the purpose you imagined for yourself. The temptation will be to wait for the full picture before moving, to demand certainty about the whole journey before you are willing to take the first step of it. Resist that temptation. The full picture is not how purpose tends to unfold for people in your position. One step reveals the next step, and only once you have taken it, the way a single lit lamp shows you only as far as the next part of the path and no further. That is how it has always worked for those who carry what you carry, and that is how it will work for you as well. The third area is your resources and opportunities. For a long time, you may have felt like you were fighting for everything. scratching for every opportunity, proving yourself over and over to people who should have already recognized your value without requiring so much convincing. You may have grown tired of having to justify your own worth in rooms where it should have been obvious. That fighting is beginning to ease. What is coming is not struggle. It is simply receiving what was already yours, what should have arrived sooner, but was being held until the right configuration of circumstances was finally in place around you. You will not need to force doors open during this next stretch, throwing your shoulder against wood that was never going to move no matter how hard you pushed. You will need to walk through the ones that open on their own, doors that required exactly this season of waiting to finally be ready for you. And you for them, because some doors only open once both sides of the threshold are prepared. As all of this begins to move, you may notice a strange mixture of emotions in excitement, certainly, but also a quiet fear. The fear that comes from finally being handed something you have wanted for so long that you almost forgot how to receive it gracefully. You may feel impatient, eager to rush ahead of the pace this is actually unfolding at, wanting to skip to the part where everything is already settled and the uncertainty is finally behind you. You may feel disbelief, a suspicion that this is too good, too sudden, too unlike the long stretch of waiting that came before it, a voice that whispers this cannot really be for you, that someone made a mistake somewhere, and the door will close again before you reach it. All of these emotions are normal. None of them mean anything is wrong with you or with the shift itself. They simply mean you are human, standing at the edge of something you have wanted for a very long time. Here is what I want to caution you against during this particular window. Do not force what is meant to unfold naturally, rushing relationships or opportunities before they are ready to be rushed, trying to manufacture in days what was designed to unfold in its own time. Do not chase people who are quietly stepping back, trying to hold on to relationships that have already served their purpose and have nothing left to offer the next version of you. Do not panic and grab the first opportunity that appears out of fear that nothing better is coming, settling for less, simply because waiting has made you tired. And do not let doubt talk you out of the step that has finally become clear, simply because it feels smaller or stranger than you expected purpose to look when it finally arrived. The shift moving toward you right now does not need your force. It needs your trust, the same steady trust that has carried you through every season before this one, whether you recognized it as trust at the time or not. You can believe in anything right now, and I mean that with full weight. You can believe that the relationships shifting around you are making room for something better aligned with who you are becoming. You can believe that the small step appearing in front of you is the beginning of something larger than you can currently see from where you are standing. You can believe that the resources and opportunities approaching are not random, but precisely timed, arriving exactly when your hands are finally ready to hold them without dropping them. Belief is not naivety here. Belief is simply agreement with what is already true and already in motion, whether or not you can see it fully yet. The same way you do not need to see the wind to trust that it is moving the trees outside your window. Chosen ones do not just receive what is given to them. They carry it, and then they multiply it, passing it forward to the next person who is standing where they once stood, in the exact season they themselves are now leaving behind. Every single person sitting with this message right now is part of something larger than any one waiting season could ever contain. A quiet, widespread movement of people finally stepping into what was always meant for them, all over the world, in different languages, at different hours of the night, each one arriving at this same recognition in their own time. If something in you recognizes that, consider letting this message reach further by pressing like, an act of choosing to be part of that movement, rather than simply watching it from a distance. Consider dropping a word in the comments, a quiet signal to other chosen ones reading through that they are not watching this shift happen alone, that someone else has already stood here and recognized it too. If you know someone still standing in the thick of their own waiting season, someone who needs to know the ground beneath them is already shifting, even if they cannot feel it yet, consider sharing this with them, a simple way of extending the recognition you have just been given to someone who has not received it yet. Consider staying here too, choosing to remain at this table rather than passing through, subscribing not as a formality, but as a decision to keep building alongside this, to be present for whatever comes next in this unfolding. And if you feel moved to sow something into the pinned comment below, consider it an investment into ground that will grow something for the next chosen one. Standing in line behind you, a way of extending what has already been extended to you. If everything I have just described feels true to where you currently stand, if you can feel that shift already beginning to move beneath the surface of your life, type the words "I am ready" in the comments below. Just that, a simple marker that you are not waiting passively anymore. You are standing in readiness for what has already begun moving toward you. Everything you just felt, stirring in the last part of this message, that quiet readiness rising up in you, that sense of something already in motion beneath the surface of your life, deserves a name. Not a label given casually, but a name that captures exactly who you have become through everything we have walked through together so far. You did not arrive here the same person who started listening to this message. You arrived carrying years of unspoken cost, a story honored rather than rushed, past, an ancient understanding of time that reframed your entire season, and a felt sense of 3 areas already shifting in your favor. That kind of journey changes a person. It leaves marks that are not visible from the outside, but are unmistakable to anyone who has walked the same road. And it deserves a name that reflects the change. I want to call you a waymaker. A waymaker is someone whose presence alone begins to open paths that did not exist before they arrived, not through force or manipulation, but simply through the integrity of who they are and the honesty with which they carry themselves through seasons most people would have abandoned long ago. A waymaker does not need to demand a path into existence. The path opens because the waymaker refused to stop walking, even when no path was visible yet. The same way Daniel refused to stop praying, even when no rescue was visible yet. The same way faithfulness in the dark eventually becomes visibility in the light. This is who you have become through everything you have walked through, whether or not you have fully recognized it in yourself until this exact moment. I chose this name for you specifically because of everything we uncovered together in the parts before this one. You have spent a long season watching doors stay closed around you, while other people seem to walk through theirs with ease, never once having to wonder if the door was actually meant for them. You have felt the particular ache of being misunderstood by people who were never going to take the time to understand the path you were actually walking. People who mistook your quiet endurance for distance or your steadiness for indifference. You carried that misunderstanding without the benefit of anyone explaining it back to you the way I am explaining it to you now, and that made it heavier than it ever needed to be. And through all of that, something in you kept moving forward anyway, kept showing up, kept refusing to let the silence around you convince you that you had been forgotten. That refusal is exactly what makes a waymaker. It is not the absence of difficulty. It is the decision to keep walking through difficulty until the path itself becomes visible to everyone watching. The same way Daniel's path became undeniably visible the moment he walked out of that den untouched, vindicated in front of the very people who had doubted him. There is something else I want you to understand about being a waymaker. Something that connects directly to the conspiracy and tension we named earlier in this message. People who are not waymakers themselves often feel uneasy around someone who is. They sense that something about you operates differently, that you do not need the same permission or the same approval that governs most people's decisions. And that unfamiliarity can translate into suspicion, distance, or the kind of quiet exclusion you have likely already experienced more than once. This is not a flaw in you. It is simply the natural response people have to something they cannot fully categorize, something that does not fit neatly into the patterns they already understand. Waymakers have always made certain rooms uncomfortable, not because they did anything wrong, but because their presence reveals a different way of moving through life that most people have not yet found the courage to attempt themselves. And that revelation, however unintentional, can feel like an accusation to people who are not ready to face it. You were never trying to expose anyone simply by being yourself. But sometimes the light does that without meaning to, simply by entering a room that has grown used to the dark. But here is what I want you to carry forward from this name, beyond simply understanding what it means. A waymaker does not only open a path for themselves. The path a waymaker creates becomes visible to everyone walking behind them. Every person who watches you keep going through what you have walked through, every person who witnesses your steadiness during a season that should have broken you, is quietly learning that the same kind of steadiness is possible for them too, even if they never find the words to tell you so. There may be people in your life right now, watching you from a distance you cannot measure, drawing quiet courage from the simple fact that you have not given up. You may never know their names. You may never hear about the difference your steadiness made in their own private seasons of doubt. But it is happening regardless of whether you can see it. You are not simply walking your own path right now. You are showing other people, whether they ever tell you this, directly or not, that a path exists where they assumed there was only a wall. This is the deeper weight and the deeper privilege of the name you now carry, a privilege that very few people ever step fully into. Because most people, understandably, simply want the difficulty to end, rather than wanting to become someone who makes the difficulty mean something. I want to be honest with you about something as we sit with this name together. Being a waymaker does not mean the path stops being difficult. It does not mean every door opens easily, or every relationship that distances itself stops hurting on its way out. The ache of being left behind by people who could not understand you does not disappear, simply because you now have a name for what you are. What it means is that the difficulty is no longer the entire story. The difficulty becomes the very material the path is built from. Every closed door you walked past without giving up, every misunderstanding you carried without becoming bitter, every quiet night you spent wondering if anyone would ever notice what you were building, all of it has been laying down the very road that other people will eventually walk on, because you refuse to stop moving, one unremarkable, unwitnessed day at a time. None of it was wasted, even the parts that felt, at the time, like they were going nowhere at all. I also want you to know that being named a waymaker does not require you to have everything figured out. You do not need a 5-year plan or a perfectly articulated purpose to carry this name honestly. You do not need to explain yourself to the people who have grown quiet around you, or perform certainty you do not actually feel. You simply need to keep doing what you have already been doing, showing up, staying faithful in the small unseen moments, refusing to let silence convince you that nothing is happening beneath the surface. That is the entire requirement. Everything else, the doors, the timing, the people arranged to meet you at exactly the right moment, all of that has already been described to you in the part before this one. Your only task is to keep walking the way you have already been walking, trusting the same appointed time that has been moving on your behalf this entire season, whether you could feel it moving or not. As we close this part of the message together, I want to offer you something simple and unhurried, a kind of blessing spoken quietly over the path you are walking and the name you now carry. May the rooms that have grown quiet around you grow loud again with people who finally understand what they are looking at. May the doors that have remained closed begin opening in a sequence and a timing you could never have orchestrated on your own. May the years that felt wasted reveal themselves in time to have been the exact preparation your path required, nothing more and nothing less. May you walk forward without needing to convince anyone of who you are, trusting instead that the proof will arrive in its own appointed hour, the same way it arrived for Daniel. On a morning he had no way of predicting the night before. May the people who misunderstood you eventually see clearly, and may it no longer matter to you nearly as much by the time they do. May you carry the name Waymaker not as a burden you must live up to, but as a simple, accurate description of who you already are, who you have already proven yourself to be through every season you did not abandon. And may the path you are making right now, quietly, faithfully, one unremarkable day at a time, become the very road that someone you love walks freely upon one day, never fully knowing how much it cost you to lay it down for them. You are a waymaker. Carry it gently. Walk forward steadily. The path is already opening beneath your feet, even in the places where you cannot yet see it. Carrying the name Waymaker is not just something to hold quietly in your heart. It comes with practical weight, real shifts you will begin to notice in 3 specific areas of your daily life. And I want to walk you through each one clearly, so that when these changes begin to show up, you recognize them immediately, instead of second-guessing what is happening around you, instead of dismissing them as small or coincidental the way you might have before this message reached you. The first area is your relationships, and there is something you can begin doing right now today, without waiting for any external confirmation that the shift has arrived. Stop spending your remaining energy trying to repair connections that have already quietly ended. You will know which ones these are. They are the friendships that now require effort from only one side, the relationships where you find yourself constantly initiating, explaining, chasing a closeness that used to come naturally and no longer does. You may have spent months, even years, trying to figure out what you did wrong to cause the distance, replaying conversations, wondering if there was a version of yourself you could return to that would make things feel the way they used to. I want to release you from that search right now. Release your grip on those relationships, not with bitterness, but with a kind of gentle honesty that allows both people to move forward without resentment. At the same time, begin paying closer attention to the people who show up at unexpected moments, the stranger who says something at exactly the right time, the acquaintance who suddenly becomes a meaningful presence, the person you meet through circumstances that feel slightly too coordinated to be accidental. These are the new people I described in the previous part of this message, already beginning to arrive, even if you have not yet recognized their faces. Old people will continue to leave on their own, without requiring confrontation or explanation from you. New people will continue to appear in the right place at the right time, without requiring effort or pursuit from you. Your only task in this area is to stop forcing what is already naturally ending, and stop overlooking what is already naturally beginning, often disguised as something too ordinary to notice at first. The second area is your purpose, and the practical action here is surprisingly simple, though it requires real discipline to follow through on. Stop asking the large, paralyzing question of what you should do with your entire life, and start paying close attention to the next small, specific thing in front of you. The question, "What should I do?" has likely felt enormous and unanswerable for a long time. The kind of question that keeps you frozen rather than moving. The kind of question you have probably asked yourself late at night without ever arriving at an answer that satisfied you. I want you to set that large question aside completely for now. Instead, ask yourself a much smaller question each morning. What is the one clear thing in front of me today? Not the entire path, just the next visible step. You will be surprised how quickly that question answers itself once you stop demanding the whole answer all at once. Write that step down if it helps you. Take it before the day grows complicated, before doubt has time to talk you out of something that initially felt obvious, before the noise of obligations and other people's expectations crowds out the quiet clarity you woke up with. This is how purpose unfolds for people in your position, not as a grand revelation delivered all at once, but as a sequence of small, clear instructions, each one only visible once you have acted on the one before it. The way a lamp lights only the next stretch of road and trusts you to keep walking toward it. The third area is your resources and opportunities, and the practical shift here is more internal than external, though the external results will follow close behind. Stop operating from a posture of fighting for what you deserve and begin operating from a posture of simply receiving what is already being prepared for you. I know this can feel difficult after years of having to push, prove, and convince people of your value. After watching less qualified people receive what you had to fight twice as hard for. But fighting and receiving are two entirely different postures, and they produce two entirely different outcomes. Fighting tightens you, makes you grasp at opportunities out of scarcity and fear that nothing else is coming, makes you say yes to things that were never actually meant for you simply because you were afraid to wait for what was. Receiving relaxes you, allows you to recognize what arrives, because you are not too busy clenching your fists to notice it when it finally appears in your hands. Practically, this means pausing before you chase the next opportunity out of anxious urgency. Ask yourself honestly whether you are reaching for it because it is genuinely aligned with what is unfolding in you, or because fear is telling you to grab anything within reach before it disappears like everything else seemed to in the past. The resources and opportunities that are actually yours will not require you to fight for them the way the season before this one required. They will simply arrive, and your only job will be to recognize them and receive them without unnecessary resistance, without the old instinct to brace for disappointment before you have even opened your hands. I want to walk you through what this looks like when all three areas begin moving together, because it rarely happens in isolation, and understanding the sequence will keep you steady when it does begin. As certain relationships quietly end, you will likely feel a temporary sense of loneliness, a gap where familiar voices used to be, a quiet you are not used to, and may initially mistake for abandonment. Do not panic during that gap. It is not permanent. It is the space being cleared for what comes next, and spaces have to be empty for a while before anything new can be placed inside them. As your purpose narrows down to one small clear step rather than a grand overwhelming vision, you may feel disappointed that it does not look as dramatic as you imagined, that it looks almost too ordinary to be the thing you have been waiting years for. Do not dismiss it because of its size. Small steps taken consistently build the same road that large visions only dream about from a distance. And as resources and opportunities begin arriving, without the same exhausting struggle you are used to, you may feel suspicious, waiting for the difficulty to return, unsure how to simply receive something good without earning it through visible effort the way you have learned to over so many years. Let that suspicion soften. Not everything good in your life from this point forward needs to be proven through struggle to be legitimate. Some things are simply given, and you are allowed to receive them without first justifying why you deserve them. There is one more practical thing I want to leave you with in this part of the message, something that ties all three areas together and will matter more than you expect in the weeks ahead. Begin keeping a simple, private record of what shifts, even small shifts, even ones that seem too minor to matter on their own. Write down the relationship that ended without conflict. Write down the small, clear step you took and where it led, even if where it led was simply to the next step after it. Write down the opportunity that arrived without the usual fight attached to it. You are not doing this to prove anything to anyone else, and you never need to show this record to a single other person. You are doing this because seasons like this one move quietly, gradually, almost imperceptibly day to day, and it is easy to forget how far you have come once you are standing somewhere new, looking back and wondering how exactly you got there. That record will become evidence, not for other people, but for you, on the days doubt tries to convince you that nothing has actually changed, that you imagine the whole shift, that you are still standing exactly where you started. You are not waiting passively anymore. You have a name now, and you have three clear, practical areas to walk forward in, one small, honest step at a time. The relationships are shifting. The purpose is narrowing into clarity. The resources are beginning to arrive without the fight that used to define them. None of this requires you to force anything. It simply requires you to notice, to release what is already ending and to receive what is already beginning to arrive in its place. Quietly, steadily, exactly on time. Everything you have carried through this message deserves to be acknowledged directly, plainly, without rushing past it the way so many things in your life have rushed past you without stopping to notice what you were actually holding. So before we go any further, I want to say something simple and sincere. Thank you for staying. Thank you for sitting with the parts of this message that were not comfortable, the honest naming of what waiting has cost you, the long night in the den that had no guarantee attached to it, the practical work of releasing what was already ending and receiving what was already beginning. Showing up for something like this, fully, without skipping ahead to the easy parts, takes a kind of trust that not everyone is willing to give. You gave it. I see that, and I do not take it lightly. There is a particular kind of courage required to sit with discomfort instead of reaching immediately for relief. And that is exactly what you did tonight, part after part, without skipping ahead. I want you to know clearly and without exaggeration that you are not sitting with this message alone. All across the world right now, in different time zones, in different languages, other chosen ones are walking into this exact same message, hearing these same words land in the exact place they needed to land, recognizing the exact same signs we named together earlier, the dreams, the distance, the strange tension in rooms that used to feel safe. Someone, somewhere is hearing this in the middle of the night, unable to sleep, finding these words at the exact hour they needed them. Someone else is hearing this in a quiet car, parked outside a home they are not quite ready to walk into yet. You are part of something far larger than your own individual season, even though your season has at times felt like the loneliest place in the world. There is comfort in that, real comfort, not the kind that minimizes what you have walked through, but the kind that reminds you the road you are on has been walked by more people than you will ever meet. People who would recognize your story instantly if you ever had the chance to tell it to them. Before we close, I want to offer you one more practice, something simple enough to do right now, in this exact moment, wherever you are. I want you to imagine, as clearly as you can, a threshold in front of you, a doorway between the season you have been walking through and the one that is beginning to open. And I want you to imagine taking everything you have carried, every sleepless night, every misunderstood conversation, every relationship that quietly ended, every year that felt wasted. Before we reframed it together, every ounce of exhaustion from fighting for things that should have simply been given to you, and placing all of it down gently at that threshold, not throwing it away in anger. Simply setting it down, the way you would set down a heavy bag after a long journey, finally allowed to rest your arms after carrying something for far longer than you should have had to. You do not need to carry that weight across the threshold with you. It served its purpose. It shaped you into who you have become. But it does not need to come with you into what is next, and nothing about leaving it behind erases what it taught you along the way. Take a breath right now and let your shoulders drop slightly, even if just a little. Feel the weight settling down at that threshold, staying behind you, no longer something you have to hold on to with both hands, while you try to walk forward at the same time. Notice how much lighter your hands feel, now that they are finally empty, free to receive whatever is waiting for you on the other side of that doorway, instead of being occupied with everything you used to carry. As you stand there, lighter than you were a few minutes ago, I want to say something else to you, something that has been sitting quietly underneath everything we have walked through together in this message. What we built here today did not happen by accident, and it did not happen only because of words coming from one direction. It happened in the space between my voice and your willingness to actually receive it, and that space belongs to both of us now, a small real thing that exists. Because you chose to stay present for it, instead of letting it pass by unnoticed. If something in you has shifted because of this message, that shift is real, and it is yours to carry forward, regardless of anything that happens next. If pressing like feels like a true way of saying that this meant something to you, without needing to find the words to explain exactly why, then let it be that simple gesture, offered quietly, the way you might nod towards someone across a room without needing to speak. If leaving something in the comments feels right, even just a few words, know that you are doing it for more than yourself. Somewhere, another chosen one will scroll through this same message, feeling alone in exactly the way. You may have felt alone before tonight, and they will read what you left behind, and they will understand, without you ever having to explain, that they did not arrive here by accident either. They will feel, just from a few words you typed without much thought, that someone else has already walked this exact stretch of road and made it through. And if there is one person who comes to mind right now, someone still standing in the thick of their own waiting season, someone who has not yet been told that their waiting is positioning rather than punishment, sharing this with them may be the simplest, quietest act of love you offer anyone today, a way of handing them the same relief you were just given. If something in this message made you want to stay, to remain in this space a little longer, consider subscribing, not as a transaction, not as a formality, but as a choice to remain part of a community of chosen ones who are waking up together, slowly, season by season, message by message, learning the same things at roughly the same time, even from very different corners of the world. There is no pressure in that choice. It is simply an open invitation left here for whenever you are ready to take it, today or some quieter day further down the road. And if, somewhere along the way tonight, something in you felt moved to pass a small blessing forward, there is a donation link gently waiting in the pinned comment below, not as an obligation, not as something expected of you, but simply as a quiet way of extending what has been extended to you tonight, if and only if that feels true for you. There is no expectation attached to it either way. You have already given enough simply by staying through every part of this message, by letting these words actually reach you instead of letting them pass by unheard the way so many words do. Before we close together, I want to mention one more thing gently, without any pressure attached to it. If the genius wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, if something in you stirred, when I described the brain turning to the frequency it was always meant to carry, and if you already know, somewhere inside yourself, that the answer is yes, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below, whenever you are ready. There is no urgency in that invitation tonight. It will simply be there. The same way certain doors stay open long after you expect them to close, patient, unhurried, exactly where you left it. You have walked through an entire message tonight, honestly, without flinching away from the difficult parts, and you are leaving it lighter than you arrived, carrying a name you did not have at the beginning, standing at a threshold you did not know existed when this message started. Whatever happens next, whatever door opens first, whatever relationship quietly shifts or quietly ends, know this: you were never forgotten. You were never overlooked. You were this entire time simply being positioned for exactly this moment, and you are standing in it now, fully, lighter, and ready. Before you go, I want to sit with you here for just a little longer, not to teach you anything new, not to add one more idea to everything you have already carried through this message, but simply to bless you quietly on your way out, the way someone might walk you to the door after a long evening together and linger there for a moment before saying goodbye. You came into this message carrying questions you may not have even fully known how to put into words, a quiet unease about the distance growing between you and people who used to feel close, a sense that something in you was being noticed in ways you could not control and did not ask for. You leave it now carrying something different, not answers to every question, because some answers are not meant to arrive all at once, but a steadiness underneath the questions that was not there before. Tonight, may the silence that falls in certain rooms when you walk in stop feeling like rejection and start feeling like reverence, the kind of hush that settles over something people do not yet have language for. May the people who have grown distant find their own peace in their own time, without you needing to chase them or explain yourself to them ever again. And may the people who are meant to walk beside you in this next season arrive exactly when you need them. Not a day early, not a day late, carrying exactly what your path requires of them. May the nights that used to stretch long with unanswered questions begin to shorten, replaced slowly by a rest that does not need to explain itself either. May you wake up some ordinary morning, not a dramatic one, just an ordinary Tuesday or a quiet Thursday, and notice, almost in passing, that the heaviness you carried for so long has quietly lifted, without you marking the exact day it happened. That is often how real change arrives, not as a single thunderous moment, but as a gradual lightning you only notice once you look back and realize how far you have come. May you remember, on the days doubt tries to convince you otherwise, that you were never punished by your waiting. You were positioned by it. Every quiet year, every misunderstood conversation, every door that stayed closed longer than you wanted it to, all of it was doing something underneath the surface that you could not see at the time and may still not fully see now. Trust that the seeing will come, in its own appointed hour, the same way it came for every chosen one who walked this road before you. May the name you carry now, Waymaker, settle into you slowly, the way a name always does, until it no longer feels like something given to you tonight, but simply feels like the truest description of who you have always been underneath everything that tried to convince you otherwise. May you wear it without needing to prove it to anyone, simply by continuing to walk the way you have already been walking, faithfully, quietly, one step revealing the next. May your relationships realign themselves around the truth of who you are, rather than around the smaller version of you that some people only ever knew how to accept. May your purpose continue to narrow, gently, into clarity, one small step at a time, until looking back becomes the only way you fully understand how far that path has actually taken you. May your resources and opportunities arrive without the fight that used to define them, met not with suspicion, but with open hands finally, ready to receive. And if somewhere in this message, in the quiet space between one sentence and the next, you felt something shift in you that you cannot fully name yet, let that feeling stay with you tonight. Do not rush to explain it. Do not rush to prove it to anyone else. Simply let it sit there quietly, the way truth often does before it becomes visible enough for anyone else to see. You are not the same person who began this message. You carry a name now. You carry a different understanding of time, one that no longer measures your worth by a clock that was never built to hold something like you. You carry the honest weight of everything this season has cost you, no longer hidden, no longer minimized, finally spoken aloud and finally honored. And you carry the quiet, settled knowledge that you were never alone in any of it. Not for a single night, not for a single unanswered prayer, not for a single moment when it felt like no one else could possibly understand. Wherever you are right now, whatever room you are sitting in, whatever hour of the night or day has found you here, I want you to know that this message reached you exactly when it was supposed to. Not too early, not too late. Exactly on time, the way everything in this season has been arriving, even when it did not look like it from where you were standing. Carry this gently from here. Carry the name. Carry the steadiness. Carry the quiet permission to stop fighting for what is already yours and simply begin receiving it instead. And when the next door opens, and it will, walk through it the same way you have walked through everything else tonight, honestly, without flinching, fully yourself. You were never overlooked. You were always being positioned. And the season you have been waiting for has already begun. Go gently. You are exactly where you are supposed to be.